to the Market Intelligence Power Forecast Briefing. Here, we'll recap activity in the U.S. power markets and utility sector, highlighting what to look out for in the near future. As we review recent power market data, it's clear that the U.S. generating fleet is in transition. In previous updates, we've flagged how retirement of conventional power plants, coal, nuclear, and even gas-fired generation has the potential to cause shortages of generation when compared to traditional metrics of reliability and reasonable cost. This problem has become compounded because where in the past traditional power plants would be replaced by newer, more modern versions of the same plants, today utilities and private developers increasingly substitute solar and wind generation for the exiting power plants. While green electricity has many desirable qualities, it is an imperfect substitute for legacy generation. This sets up a rough transition over the next 5 years in markets where green electricity is expected to expand rapidly. In today's briefing, we'll consider 3 regions of the U.S. that are experiencing rapid transition from conventional to renewable forms of power production, and we'll go over the challenges each of these regions may face. First, we have the Electric Reliability Council of ERCOT, of Texas, or ERCOT. ERCOT saw over 5 gigawatts of coal-fired generation leave the market in 2017 and 2018. And it also has a high demand growth rate, especially as the E&P sector has expanded, roughly 2% per year. Most of the generation developed since 2018 is wind and solar. To incentivize additional investment in generation, Texas boosted its scarcity payment curve for utilities and merchants to build against. Market Intelligence estimates this will revise the equilibrium reserve margin up to around 11.5% and force, or at least incentivize, new capacity additions into the market. So what types of generation do we forecast ERCOT will build? In response to higher power prices in the summer of 2018, new gas generation has been moved forward in the marketplace, but we do expect that very little of that generation will be added in time for this summer. Green energy, on the other hand, has moved forward rapidly and is expected to contribute substantially, almost 40% of the peak contribution needs of the ERCOT market by 2021. More wind and solar is in progress, contributing another 2,500 megawatts to generation reserves. But we do expect that about 6,000 megawatts of peak contribution will be needed to keep pace with demand growth, and that about 2,500 megawatts of that will come from gas generation, while about 2,500 megawatts will come from renewable generation. Moving to the Western Interconnect, the Southwest U.S. is a second area where we have flagged potential generation shortfalls if the coal-fired Navajo generation station retires on schedule at the end of this year. Like Texas, this area of the country has electricity demand growth higher than the U.S. average, about 1.7% per year. But unlike Texas, several states in the desert Southwest have renewable portfolio standards, which are mandates to add wind, solar, and sometimes battery storage over the next 15 to 20 years. Against a regional reserve target of 13.6%, the chart shown flags that nearly 2,100 megawatts in new capacity will be needed after Navajo retires. We expect long-term capacity additions of about 500 megawatts per year, offset by new solar build. So given the immediate need and high forecast growth, what types of generation do we forecast the Southwest will build? Well, currently only about 1,000 megawatts of firm peak contribution is under construction, evenly split between solar and natural gas plants. An additional 4,500 megawatts will be needed to replace Navajo and the San Juan plant in 2022 to keep pace with demand growth. Much of that will be fulfilled by boosted renewable mandates in New Mexico and Nevada, which drive a lot of peak contribution in the market. But as in Texas, green energy will contribute substantially, more than 50% of new build peak contribution by 2023. Finally, California will have a great deal of retiring generation to replace over the next 5 years. Southern California in particular has been among the most aggressive regions of the country in expanding solar generation, and California as a whole has probably the most aggressive renewable portfolio standards for a market of its size. California's rate of load growth is low in contrast to ERCOT in the Southwest, thanks in part to distributed solar generation. So how is CAISO pushing the green transition envelope? Against reserve margins of 15%, it has flat load growth. It's pursuing gas repowering projects plus solar to mitigate the 2021 once-through cooling retirements. And it has added a 1,300 megawatt mandate for battery storage. To help deal with the effects of the solar duck curve, California has expanded battery storage at existing facilities, which we expect will contribute an additional 970 megawatts of peak capacity by 2021. But as this chart shows, the region will rely heavily on expansion of green energy, both to meet renewable mandates and provide reserves. In conclusion, if there are headwinds in the transition to green energy, we're most likely to see them first in Texas, the Southwest, and in California. If, on the other hand, these regions of the country manage the transition with relatively few problems, it will likely accelerate the transition to green energy nationwide. Thank you again for joining us, and tune in later for the next Power Forecast briefing.